Hello, welcome to the Officio Spotlight podcast. My name is Simon Lipscomb and thank you very much for listening. Today, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Rendi Miller. Rendi is the Vice President of Global Travel and Procurement at Qualtrics. Qualtrics is a provider of cloud-based experience management software. Prior to Qualtrics, Rendi has held senior procurement roles in Zendesk, Splunk, and Seagate Technologies. And she's also the founder of Silicon Valley Sourcing Leaders, which I'm sure is something we'll pick up later in our conversation. So Rendi, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation today. When we went through the preparation conversation, there were lots of big topics that I thought you had a fascinating perspective on that I'm really keen that we pick up in this discussion. But I thought as a starting point, I think it's really interesting, particularly in the more recent parts of your career. You've obviously got great experience working in tech businesses, but actually I think some tech businesses that are either startups or high growth businesses. And we're lucky enough to have procurement people across the world on this podcast, but we're often talking to people from bigger, more established businesses where procurement has a clear role, often about cost reduction. I'm just fascinated to understand from your experience, what's it like to be in a procurement role in an organization that's new or growing so fast? It must be different, but I'm intrigued to understand how or why.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just say thank you so much for having me, inviting me to be here with you today. I'm excited for our conversation. So the difference in these really fast-paced startup or just high growth companies, you're working at such a fast pace. And I think the frustrating part for procurement professionals is that you don't have time to do all the things that you really want to do or do things the way you would want to do them. Okay. Whereas at a larger, more established, more, with a consistent flow type of company, you've got the time and you are forced to make the time to really go through the however many steps, the 7-step process or the 9-step, whatever method you're following. And so you're kind of forced into that. And I think that is just part of the culture. Whereas, with startups and high growth companies, they just want everything fast. And, most of us who have been around the block and done this for quite some time know that it's just not possible to always do things really fast when it comes to procurement if you want to do it right. So it's challenging sometimes, and you have to really be agile and modify your process and go, where can we cut? How can we do this quickly, but still do it right and still feel like we're coming out at the end of this with valid justification for the decisions that we're making, the best cost at the best quality as well. And you just have to figure out where can you eliminate some of the steps? And sometimes that's possible depending on what it is that you're procuring. Other times you got to take the time. And a lot of times it's just educating your stakeholders that this is going to take a minute. And, we're not going to get through this really fast if we're going to do it right. And then also convincing them that it's going to be so much more worth it when you do it the right way. And when you get to that end result.
Your point about stakeholders is really interesting. I guess the cliche of startup businesses or tech businesses move fast and break things, and there's variations of that kind of ethos, right? But I'm really interested in your role in those businesses and how do you manage the stakeholders who I'm guessing have them, let's go, let's not worry about breaking things mentality, whereas you're looking at a broader picture.
I think managing your stakeholders starts with building a relationship with them and understanding what their needs are and really sitting with them and understanding what their goals are, where they want to go. And you have to do this on a very regular basis. It's not just let's sit down at the beginning of the year, but even at the beginning of the quarter, depending on what group you're managing, but really understanding them and understanding that category. So if your stakeholders are in marketing, you support the marketing category or IT, whatever it might be, but you got to understand it too. And so coming to your stakeholders with an understanding of their business really provides credibility. And then when you can say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do it fast, but this is what fast is, and not fast may mean something different to me as a procurement professional, as opposed to a marketing or an engineering professional. So kind of educating on that, what that looks like, but then creating the value and explaining the value to them of what that is going to render them in the end.
Rendi, is there a different definition of value in a tech business? Because you've got a experience in tech and in startups, but in other parts of industry as well. In your experience, is there a different definition of what value of procurement is in a tech business?
Yes, I think so. And I do think it's changing. I think procurement is becoming much more valuable because whether you are a startup, whether you are an established SaaS company, whether you've just maybe been acquired by private equity, because that is just rampant right now, procurement is becoming much more valuable across the board because, just due to macroeconomic environment that we're in, procurement is everybody's best friend. And the CFOs are now starting to say, has procurement looked at this? Has procurement negotiated this? So I think the value is gaining across the board, regardless of what industry you're in. But the definition of value, does it change between different types of companies? I don't think so. I think it is what it is. And like I said, the best value, and to me, that means cost and quality. And I would assume probably if you're in a manufacturing space and a widget is a widget is a widget, right? Some type of a component, value is just cost driven. But for most SaaS companies, 99% of what you're buying is SaaS and it's a service. And that's a little harder to quantify in terms of value because the quality of that service and how it's delivered can vary widely. And sometimes it's hard to measure that exactly.
Yeah, understood. Rendi, the other thing I was fascinated talking to you, you're very passionate about is networks, the value of networks, the value of connections, the value of people, I think. Love to explore that a little bit more with you. Obviously, we talked about you being a founder of Silicon Valley Sourcing Leaders. So perhaps you can if you could take us through a little bit of your context on that and why that's such an important topic for you and you feel so passionately about it.
Yeah, well, I'm passionate about it because I don't think I would be where I am in my career without it. And so it has really been kind of a pillar of what has helped propel me in my career. And nearly every role I've gotten has been because of my network and being referred or somebody, literally one job I got, my job at Splunk was my neighbor said, hey, I hear you do procurement. And so, your network is everywhere. It's not just in, these formal groups and things like that. It's not just how it has taken me from, one company to another, but it's also just in how I've built my teams and the organizations that I've been able to lead. There's others that have gone before me, and I'm a firm believer in, let's leverage the intelligence and the experience of others rather than always trying to create your own wheel. I have a kind of a small group of people who now have become really close friends and who have been there for me in personal situations as well as professional, who I know that I can go to them with any question. And if they don't have an answer, they know somebody else who does. And it's the best way to find out, well, how are you using this tool? Or, what kind of pricing are you getting? Or, am I in the range here? Or just tell me, I'm looking for a new vendor in a certain space. You got any suggestions? It's really the power of people, I think. And it has really changed my life and changed my career trajectory in having that network. I believe in it so much because of what it's done for me that you mentioned I started the Silicon Valley Sourcing Leaders. That was birthed out of, I was at Splunk at the time. Splunk was a smaller company. We had just gone public, and there was an organization in the Bay Area, but it was only for companies with $1 billion revenue and above. And so we were too small. I was not able to join and decided, well, there's got to be a whole lot of other people just like me who, aren't quite big enough. So let's start our own group because we know our companies are going to get there, but we don't want to wait and we need something now. Yeah. And it's been so fun to start that. And it's widely open to anybody that wants to join. And, I think it's just been really very successful and very well received when we did it.
Yeah. And Rendi, if I was a procurement person listening to this podcast, assuming I'm not in Silicon Valley, I think if I was in Silicon Valley, I'd know where to go. But have you got any general thoughts, any tips about how people should approach this topic, how people could replicate the success you've had, the kind of career opportunities that have come to you? Just any advice, really?
Yeah, actually, the model that we did here in the Bay Area has been replicated in New York City, one in Utah now. And so it has, I think Chicago maybe even as well. For me, it was one of my vendors who connected me with some other people. Because like I said, this was pretty early on in my time at Splunk that I did this. And so it introduced me to a few other people that I had met at conferences and things like that. So I got a group of about 5 people and said, what do you think about this? Let's do this. And so I think start to connect with other companies in your region or your area. Get in touch, either on LinkedIn or, something with other procurement leaders, and then just start brainstorming and thinking about how do we start to reach out. And again, we had a vendor that sponsored us, and vendors are very, very keen to get involved and even just host it.
Right.
And we wanted to really make sure that this was not a selling motion, and this is not their opportunity to come in and pitch their product and things like that, because that's the last thing that procurement professionals want when they get together is, to feel like, they're just being attacked by salespeople. They really just hosted it and gave us, sometimes it's a venue, sometimes it's swag or, something like this. That has been great because they also have a ton of connections and contacts in your area. And so then you start just utilizing their resources as well. So that helped us a lot to get started.
Got you. Makes sense. Rendi, the other thing you talk with great passion about is women in procurement, women in tech. You are obviously both of those things, a woman and in procurement and in tech. I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to see the amazing women in procurement and in tech that are rising up and just blazing a trail ahead. I just see it growing all the time. I don't think it's equal yet. And I don't think there is equity between pay. I think there's still a gap there. But, when I started, it was very much a man's world. And particularly in the manufacturing space, it was very male dominated. And it was very, very challenging to move up in the ranks, to get those promotions and things like that. So I was one of two women on a team of, at the time was probably 20 of us. And so the female representation was very low. And I think one of the things that really helped is, and this is kind of, on the theme of networking as well, but was getting a mentor, getting a woman who was a leader she was not in procurement, but she was an executive at the company that I was working at. It was really, really beneficial to get her perspective and to get that guidance when I was younger, much younger. It's kind of funny because I used to really notice when I was the only woman in the room, and now I show up and it's not the first thing that I notice whatsoever. It's still common. It's very often that I am the only woman in the room or on a call, with a vendor or internally, but I don't notice it so much anymore. I don't feel that intimidation. I feel heard. I do think that women are really gaining the respect of our male colleagues and peers, and those days are gone, particularly in the SaaS space. I can't speak so much still to manufacturing because it's been years since I've been out of that. And I do have, several good procurement friends that are women that are still in that space. But I do think it's getting better. Like I said, there are so many great women that are rising up as leaders, and it excites me. And anything that I can ever do to help promote a female leader, I'm all about it.
And how did you do it, Rendi? Right? You started in a man's world, you've risen right to the very top. How did you do it?
Well, I mentioned having this mentor who was amazing. And when I left Seagate and went to Splunk, I kind of thought, gosh, I'm not really sure I know what I'm doing here. It's the first time I've ever built my own organization from the ground up. I am very grateful for the time that I had at Seagate because we talked a little bit about the difference between a very large, well-established kind of old school company as compared to a SaaS company. So I felt like I got this really, really great foundation. And how did I do it? Sometimes I think I just, when you're kind of young and dumb, you just are like so confident and you think, I can do this. Sure, I can do this. And you just go and you just start doing it. And I took a chance, not knowing everything. So I think that was one of the biggest pivoting points for me was knowing that I didn't know everything, but going for it anyway and saying, I can do this, and starting to call on people who had done this before and saying, this is where I think I want to start and this is what I think I want to do. am I on the right path? Does this sound right? Then once you start, your confidence just builds. And now I think there's not anything that I can't do. And that is one of my biggest pieces of advice when I speak to women or I'm mentoring women who are looking for new roles or make a move in their career is don't look at a job description and say, I can't do this, 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 and this, so I'm not qualified. Look at it and say, I can do this, this, and this. I got this. I'll figure out how to do the other stuff. And I think that has been one of my key learnings, is that I'm a lot smarter than I thought I was. And I think especially for women, we don't give ourselves enough credit. And when we start to build that confidence, it just blossoms and flourishes. And I think that's what's got me where sometimes just going, I'm just going to go for it. I don't know if the first time I got a VP role, I was like, what am I doing sitting at the CFO table? I'm not sure I have anything to contribute. Everybody else is smarter than me. You constantly have this imposter syndrome, and it's just important to get over that really quick.
No, that's great. So for any young women listening to this, be more like Rendi, just do it, go out. Both men and women leaders in procurement, what do they need to be doing to support this cause, right? How can they be helping?
They just need to be reaching out and being there for other people, for whoever it is. One of the things that I find most rewarding in my role is leading and developing my team. And so I think that's really important. I've had people who I've hired from other industries, and they've come in and they've said, wow, the procurement industry is really all about helping each other. It's not like people are just out for themselves, and which is super impressive. And I'm really, really proud to be a part of an industry like that. So, I think just continuing to do that and looking for ways and being available to others that are, maybe younger in their careers, and really helping them to grow and develop. So we all have so much to learn from each other. I still have, a lot to learn too. I don't claim that I've arrived and, know everything that there is. And especially, things constantly change. So I'm still looking to my peers and friends and colleagues for what I can learn from them as well. So just being available. And one thing that I'll say on mentoring, I spoke about my mentor that I had early on in my career, who was a woman. I think women and men need to not be afraid to mentor each other, because I think sometimes women go, oh, I need to find a female leader to mentor me because she'll understand where I'm at or where I'm coming from, or understand that the unique challenges that I have as a woman. But it's really good to get a man's perspective. I was fortunate to have some really good managers that were men that mentored me as well. But I think that's important, that we're not afraid and we don't think we can't learn something from our counterparts. That's just a little piece of advice that I've gathered over the years.
And so, Rendi, you've had this great career. You've risen to the top in our world of procurement. Are you still excited about the world of procurement? What's next for you? What is it that excites you? What do you see coming down the line in the future, right, for our industry?
I am very excited about the industry. I was just on a call yesterday with a new vendor looking at what they're doing. And I said, when I started, this is going to date me and age me really quick here, but when I started, we were printing out paper requisitions that my manager was signing every day. I remember, I'll never forget the stack of purchase orders that sat on his desk every day that he had to go in and sign. And we were very early adopters of Ariba when Ariba was pre-IPO. I've seen a lot in the procurement space, but where we are now, there's just so much procure tech. And I think it's really, really fascinating and exciting what is being done out there from a technology perspective to make procurement easier, to make it more user-friendly, to capture everything in one place. Gone are the days of spreadsheets and things like this. It's really exciting to me where the industry is going. And again, I think we are having to work faster, and you can't just throw more bodies at things. So getting technology and automating a lot of that is really key. And I think there's some really exciting new players coming into the market.
Rendi, that seems like a perfect place to draw the conversation to a conclusion. Thank you so much for your time today. It's a fascinating conversation. Really interesting to get your thoughts on all those topics. So thank you for spending the time with me.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation, and great to see you again, Simon.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us a click on the follow button on your chosen podcast platform. We'd also love to hear your views on either future topics or indeed if you've got any thoughts on future guests that we should look to get onto the podcast. Thanks again. See you next time.